Notes for section 4.2a, we're looking at factoring trinomials with a equals 1. So the coefficient a being the coefficient of the x squared term. In the standard form for a quadratic, you're going to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So right now we're looking at the terms that have that a equals 1, so they actually would be starting with x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so that's what we're looking at for this section, is how to factor polynomials of this form. What we're going to look at first right here is the relationship between the factored form and the product form, or the distributed form. So we've got a product right here to consider first of all. How does that distributed form work? What does the original factored form have to do with the pieces from the distributive form? So we know that when we distribute, we multiply our x times x to get our x squared. Then we multiply our x times 3 to get the 3x, our 4 times x to get the 4x. Then we finally multiply the 4 times 3 to get the 12. Okay. So just to check right here about what are these two numbers? We have x in the first position. So what do these two numbers 4 and 3 have to do with the two numbers in the result, with the 12 in the result and with the 7 in the result? So because of the 4 times x and 3 times x being added up here, it turns out that the 7 is the sum. This is supposed to be like around that 7. That's the sum of those two numbers, and the 12 is the product of those two numbers. Okay, so 4 plus 3 is 7, and 4 times 3 is 12. Got our product there in our sum. Okay. Now we're going to try, when we factor, to deconstruct the sum product pair to find the two numbers that add to the middle number and multiply to the end number. Okay. Now we have to do this by thinking about, first of all, which two numbers multiply to that 12 and then add up to that 7. Okay. I should start at the top bullet here. I just skipped right over instinctively, unfortunately. So the reason that this works, by the way, is because there is only one way to that first part, to do that x times x, right? The only way to multiply to x squared is x times x. So we can fill in the first pieces of our parentheses automatically, because x times x is the only way to get x squared. Then, because of that, we just need to break down those last two spaces to get those middle two pieces. I should have mentioned that first. All right. Now, we have to do the multiply piece first, not the add piece, because there are an infinitely many ways to add to a number, but a finite number of ways to multiply to a number. For example, just 12. We know that we could make multiplying to 12, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. You can switch the order on those, so technically instead of 3, you can have a total of 6 pairs if you switch the order, but with whole number multiplication, that's all you've got. There's no other way to multiply to 12. But to add to 7, it could be 1 and 7, it could be 2 and 5, it could be negative 10 and 17. If you think about both positives and negatives, there's an infinitely many way to get there. You can think about positives and negative multiplications. If you make all those negatives, just another set of 3, so you've only got a possible 12 to get there. Okay. So, and again, as we've noted out here, the other pairs, like this one doesn't work, so if I was going to try multiplying to 12, that one doesn't work, that one does work, and so we could factor this. So we're going to try factoring it with these two examples below here for practice. Okay. So I'm going to start with x squared plus 17x equals 30. I have a product. My product is going to be 30, and I have a goal of a sum of 17. So I just want to think anything that goes into 30, first of all, and then figure out the sum is, and we'll see yes or no, did we get it on the first try or not. So for example, I know that 5 times 6 is 30, but I know that 5 plus 6 is 11. So with that pairing, we didn't get it. That was not the 17 that we need. No problem, let's try it again. We know that 3 times 10. 3 times 10 is 30. The calculator's handy right here. You can just divide 30 by 7 until you find a pair of numbers that goes into it. So 3 plus 10 is 13. So again, We didn't get it, so we try again. 2 times 15 is 30, and 2 plus 15 is 17. So we finally got it on this one, and so that's the pair of numbers. So when I go back, So when I go back to factor this one, my parentheses will start with x, leave some space, x, because I know that the only way to make the x squared is with an x times an x, and the two numbers are going to be 2 and 15. In this problem, I'm trying to multiply to a positive 30 and add to a positive 17, so I need them to both be positive numbers. We'll talk about sign of those on the next page. But I know that a positive 2 times a positive 15 is a positive 30, and a positive 2 plus a positive 15 is a positive 17. And so that's the answer to the factoring. Again, factoring is the opposite of the distributive property. If I distributed these two parentheses back together, I go back to the original here. It's been factored. All right, we're going to try it again. This time I have a negative 40 as the goal for my product, and I have a positive 30 as the sum for my product. Right away, when I have a negative number, I know that I'm trying to multiply one negative number together and one positive number together. That's the only way of multiplying two and negative. So instead of keeping two positives, I'm going to have one sign number, one negative number, and one positive. All right, so we're going for 40. So I know, for example, that 2 times 20, right? 2 times 20. I have to put a negative with one of them. I'll go ahead and put it with the first one for now. Negative 2 times 20 is negative 40. So that's going to be negative 2 plus 20, which is 18. Okay? That doesn't work. I just noticed a typo, by the way. There's not an X there. I apologize, I just fixed the typo. It wasn't supposed to be a 30. It was supposed to be a 3 and an X. I'm going to have to change that in the printed version for next time, because yours also has a 0 there instead of an X, so just typo. So we're going to change this here to 3, is what we're looking for as our sum goal. All right, so it's just supposed to be an X. Okay, now that we fixed that, the first one still didn't work, and we're looking at the next one. So what else goes into our 40? 4 and 10. So we'll try negative 4, positive 10. And that would give us negative 4 plus 10, which is 6. That didn't do it either. What else goes into negative 48? So I could try negative 8, and it goes in 5 times. And if I try that, negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3. Now that one didn't work either, but it's very close. I don't want a negative 3, I want a positive 3. So we're just going to switch the signs. Let's try it with 8 and negative 5. So 8 plus negative 5, or minus 5, is positive 3. So on the next page, we're going to talk about how to determine what signs you should be looking for each of the values. For right now, I was guessing, but I've got a strategy for that on the next page. So our answer up here for the factored form is going to have an x in both parts of the parenthesis, both parts of the first parenthesis, because x times x is x squared, and our two numbers are going to be positive 8 and negative 5. It doesn't matter which of these two parentheses, which of these two numbers you write first. It does matter that the 8 is positive and that the 5 is negative. Okay, that next page I was talking about was our strategies. So tips for factoring with C positive. So the C value, the last value right there being positive. And then we have down below tips for a C value that is negative. Okay, so the C value is the multiplicative value. So if you have a multiplicative value that is positive, a positive constant term, it means that you need two numbers that are the same sign. So you can have either two positives or you can have two negatives, right? Because two positives multiply to a positive and two negatives multiply to a positive. But more specifically than that, you know that two positives add to a positive and that two negatives add to a negative. So with a positive, C, you know that you're looking for two of the same, and your B term will tell you what type, positives or negatives. So here, positive C, two of the same, two positives. So I'm looking here for two positives. Positive C, so I'm looking for two of the same, they have to both be negative. So I know I'm looking for two negatives. Okay, if that makes sense. The only way to multiply to a positive is with either two positives or two negatives. Two positives will add to a positive, and two negatives will add to a negative. So I know exactly what kind of numbers I'm looking for. So let's look for our factors. Our two positive factors here first. I like to make my little table. I'm looking for a product of 15 and a sum of 8. So I try 3 and 5. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 plus 5 is 8. And we found it on the first try, so that's going to be our pair of numbers. So we can go ahead and factor this right away as x plus 3 and x plus 5. Sometimes you find them on the first try, sometimes it takes a few tries. It just depends on what number you happen to choose first. Okay, the next one we said was going to be two negatives. So I'm looking for a product of 20 and a sum of negative 9. And so I'm looking at two negative numbers. I'm going to make myself a little note right there. Like this one was two positives, this one's two negatives, just so I don't forget or I write it down. So for example, 20, that's negative 2, negative 10. And negative 2 plus negative 10 is negative 12. So we didn't get it on that first try, that's okay. And then we'll try something like negative 4 times negative 5. And negative 4 plus negative 5 is negative 9. And so now we got it. So back into our factoring, we have our x minus 4 and our x minus 5. Let me change pages. All right. So that's how it works with a C positive. With a C negative, you know that you're looking for two opposites, and the way to multiply to a negative is with a positive and a negative. So they need to have opposite signs. So if I have something like negative 24, I know it's going to be a positive and a negative multiplied to a negative 24. But I can tell which of them is going to be larger based on B. If I have two numbers to add up, one positive, one negative, if the larger one is positive, then the middle term is going to be positive. If the larger one is negative, the middle term is going to be negative. So I can tell based on whether that B is positive or negative, if my larger term will be positive or if my larger term will be negative. Alright, so for this one, I'm just going to do my chart a teeny bit differently. This is actually how I usually do it. So I have negative 24, and I know I need one positive, one negative with a larger positive this time. Alright, because I have a middle term that's positive. Now I'm going to do my numbers that go into 24, and I'm just going to add them and put the solution over here. So let's see, let's do, how about 3 and 8? Larger positive, so we'll do 8 minus 3, which is 5, and that didn't work. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm just simplifying my chart a little bit so I don't show the product part of it. I'm really just showing the sum part of it because I know the product is the answer up here. But if you'd like to have both parts of your column, you can definitely keep those. Let's see, 6 and 4 go into 8, large positive, so 6 minus 4 is 2, got it. So I know that I want this to be x plus 6 and x minus 4. You can always double check and multiplying it back out that you have the original as your distributed result. Okay, and our last one, we're looking for, I started making the old kind of chart, I can just stick with it now. I'm looking for a negative 16 with a negative 6 as the sum. And it's got to be one positive, one negative. And I know that the negative has to be larger this time to get that 6 to turn out negative. Alright, so in my negative 16, I need something like negative 8 plus 2. And, oops, sorry, negative 8 times a positive 2 gives me the negative 16 in that style of chart. Negative 6 plus 2 on this side gives me negative 6. We got it on the first try. So that's going to be x with a negative 8, x minus 8, and x plus 2.